A girl with red eyes approaches and someone calls out the name Linori. She places her hand on his face and he seems confused, wondering who she is. Blood flies and she has killed the boy. That one lasted a long time. She drops the knife and falls into some kind of void. The boy wonders if he really got stabbed, why she was crying, and how she knew his name. Amidst these questions, suddenly, he wakes up back in the classroom, reading a manga. Our protagonist's name is Takafuji Linori, 17 years old. He's confused, not knowing what that dream was, but he's in the same classroom as always. The days were the same, or at least they should have been. Suddenly, a magic circle surrounds the entire classroom, and a burst of purple energy explodes. Everyone covers their faces, and Takafuji then finds himself with his hand on the floor, not knowing what's happening. He is now next to his classmates, unable to understand how they ended up there. Obviously, everyone is screaming in panic, wanting to know where their classroom went. At that moment, an angel appears, telling everyone to calm down. They were in the path of souls, known as the void between worlds, and she was what people usually called a goddess. All of them had been summoned to another world to become heroes who would defeat the Demon King. So far it seems cliche, but pretty soon it will get kinda crazy. The guys are standing there looking dumbfounded, wondering what this hero business is. She then explains that they will be transported to a world called Burge, in an empire called Hyjin. The fools are standing there with their mouths open, not understanding much of it. Meanwhile, Takafuji can only think about how this is just like the plot of any random story. However, the angel continues explaining that soon they would leave this place and arrive in that other world. But before that happened, they would all receive a gift. Her hand appears over each of their heads and she tells them that with this, they will receive a special ability. They should be careful not to be corrupted by this power and lead people the right way. She wishes them good luck and the scene shifts to the castle. Slowly, Takafuji opens his eyes and finds himself in a room with everyone else. A slightly tired-looking girl says that, apparently, the summoning was a success. The old men around them all celebrate, saying that the saint is truly reliable. Now the world would finally become a safe place again. Or so they say before telling everyone to be quiet. A man stands up and thanks them all for coming to this world. His name is Leisen, and he is the Emperor of Hyjin. The guy even kneels, and together with everyone else, he begs them to defeat the Demon King. Takafuji notices that at least they are being treated as nobles. At that moment, a glasses-wearing fool steps forward and asks His Majesty not to act like that. He then says he wants to ask if there's a way for them to return to their original world. Someone steps forward and says they will answer that. The girl introduces herself as Saint Asia and says that they can indeed return to their original world. However, that would only be possible in a month when the full moon was in the sky again. And so anyone who didn't intend to fight the Demon King could stay peacefully in the royal castle for a month and then go back home. Our boy is thinking that this feels like a tourist trip to explore another place. The girls are wondering what will happen during the month they won't be there. According to the saint's explanation, the timeline of that world won't change, and they will be sent back to the exact same place. Our boy is thinking that all of this seems way too convenient. Something feels off. Then the saint asks who wants to return after a month and says they just need to say so and no one will stop them. The group looks like they want to speak up, but she just pleads with them to save her country and this world. Takafuji thinks that normally, this is the moment when some hero wannabe steps forward and declares they will fight for them. But here, there's only silence, meaning it looks like his class doesn't have a hero. The guy with glasses then says that everyone seems a little uncertain and asks if they can make this decision later. The king is there with his eyes closed, and our boy just notices that for now, everyone is pretty calm. Then Leisen says that in 1 month they will be able to choose whether they want to return to their world or sign a contract to become heroes here. Today is a celebration, so they should enjoy themselves. Our boy thanks them and immediately goes to try the food. Tasting another world's cuisine is perfect. He's excited to find out what ingredients are used in a fantasy world. But suddenly, the same portal that appeared beneath his feet in the classroom shows up again. He assumes it must be the work of the Empire's mages, who have already mastered their magic to this extent. He's truly eager to experience everything in this fantasy world. But then someone calls out to him. They want to know why he is the only one with a circle beneath his feet. Before he can process what's happening, he finds himself back in the same place where he met the saint, the so-called Path of Souls. The blonde appears, introducing herself, but seems a little confused. He greets her, saying they've met again, but she asks if he wasn't just here a moment ago. He replies that he was. The poor girl doesn't quite understand why this is happening. He wants to know if he's about to be summoned somewhere else, and she says probably. The problem is, there's a rule that everyone who steps into this place must receive a talent, so she places her hand on his head once again. She wishes him good luck, but our boy complains that being sent back and forth like this is irresponsible. During this whole process, he remembers that the previous circle was purple, while this one is yellow with different symbols. Then he realizes he's tied to a chair, gagged, and figures this is no time for analysis. An old man approaches, saying that it looks like the summoning was a success. Another one beside him says the boy will be called test number 12. The old man comes closer, commenting that it seems he has an offensive type magic eye. Being referred to as a test subject, Takafuji was not interested in this situation at all. It seemed these summonings were much more dangerous than he had imagined. The two lunatics start smiling, saying they will now proceed with the experiment. It's more than obvious to our boy that this is one of those crazy scientists. The man steps forward with his scalpel, saying it's time to find out what his magic eye is all about. The old man explains that there are records stating that humans summoned from another world develop a magic eye upon arrival, and his job is to prove that it's true. Our boy quickly realizes that this so-called magic eye must be the gift he received from the goddess when he arrived in this world. The old man stretches out his hand, explaining that it would be problematic if the boy had an outburst of rage or lost control. That's why he will be put into hypnosis. For a second, Takafuji is startled, but then he just watches the man casting his magic circle. The old man realizes that not only is the effect minimal, it actually seems like it's not working at all. The problem is, this is supposed to be an advanced hypnosis spell. Takafuji finds it ridiculous that this is what they call advanced magic. At that moment, the other man calls for the doctor. Takafuji's left eye holds the magic eye of time, while his right eye contains the magic eye of truth. The man is shocked and celebrates, saying that possessing two eyes of such caliber is extremely rare. Immediately, they pull out their tools, saying they must begin testing right away because this is incredible. However, Takafuji knows that if they start surgery without hypnosis, it's nothing short of torture. He absolutely does not want that to happen and wonders if he can escape using his magic eye. Suddenly, a circle appears beneath his feet. The scientists look confused, but our boy and we already know exactly what's happening. He appears before the goddess, who is once again looking like a fool. She says this is the third time and asks if he likes her that much. Our boy just says it's inevitable. Then he questions whether she has any idea why this is happening. She doesn't really know what to say, admitting that this is the first time something like this has happened, and she will have to investigate further. Takafuji realizes that by now he has seen this woman so many times that he is casually chatting with a goddess. But before he can get any answers, he appears before a young noble girl. An elf praises her, saying it's incredible that she managed to summon a humanoid monster on her first try. However, our boy did not appreciate being called a monster. In this world, he was treated like a creature and almost forced into his subordination contract. But then the magic circle activated again. He reappears in front of the goddess, already smiling. She asks if he's not tired of all this. Our boy just wants to know why the summoning keeps happening over and over again. She then said she had an idea, but there was little time, so she would have to explain it briefly. She explained that the targets of a summoning must have a strong soul that is necessary to cross between worlds, and it seems that the boy had an extremely strong and rare soul. Takafuji said that he wasn't even a saint or a good person, so it was strange that he had such a pure soul. She said it wasn't about purity, but simply that he was strong. What he needed was for his soul to bind to one of these worlds to activate the hero's contract, and then this would stop happening. The scene then shifts to a castle, where a girl holding an orb says that he now has the ability to steal abilities. He is impressed by the girl's beauty, and in this fourth summoning, he received another gift. He ran straight toward her to form the hero's contract, but before he could start, the teleportation activated again. On the fifth time, he was summoned through dark magic. The girl was exhausted, sweating with her clothes all torn, while he appeared completely relaxed. At the top of a castle on the peak of a mountain. On the sixth summoning, he was brought as the resurrected demon lord, and all the monsters celebrated. But now, back in the sky, the angel commented that he had been accumulating incredible abilities. He was impressed, but then she said that the next summoning would probably be the last. That's why she would now combine all his abilities, and when he was summoned again, he should check his status. He would probably be able to see it with his right eye. Inside a castle, someone welcomed the hero. He calmly opened his eyes, thinking, here we go again. But suddenly, he was now with other people in this place. A high school student named Ryu Shinzaki and another girl named Taumaki Kurosawa. She called out to her friends, and a final girl named Elway Isogai appeared. At that moment, someone on the throne spoke. The king said that according to legend, they must be heroes. The protagonist noticed that everyone summoned here knew each other, except him. Everyone was wondering why he was summoned randomly among these three. They all turned to the king, who questioned if the three of them were the heroes and he was just an extra person brought along. The other three confirmed, and the man said this was the first time he had heard of such a thing. Then another girl arrived, asking if they were the heroes from the other world. She introduced herself as the first princess and personally took credit for summoning them, saying they should be grateful. Our boy immediately realized that this one was one of those annoyingly self-important princesses. She then informed them that they were now in the kingdom of the rising sun, a place where not only humans existed but also demi-humans and demons. Obviously, the demons were the enemies, led by the Demon King. They had their own nation and were invading all territories. That demoness really seemed dangerous. Be careful, young mortals. That was why all of humanity had joined forces to summon heroes. However, only women of royal blood could do it, and of course, she was the chosen one. Each country was obligated to train the heroes they summoned to kill the Demon King. They must have realized by now what a brilliant plan this was. However, Takafuji understood that their plan was just to summon a bunch of heroes and hope someone would take care of things. The princess asked them to become stronger as representatives of this kingdom and to kill that shameless Demon King. At that moment, Tamaki spoke up with a question. How were they supposed to return to their original world? The princess simply said that was impossible. After all, they should feel honored to be the proud heroes of the Kingdom of the Sun and should be grateful for their situation. Our boy was fuming, thinking that these bastards needed to take some customer service lessons from the Kingdom of Hyjin. The king then told them to place their hands on the stone to discover the talents they received as heroes. The tablet was brought forward, and when Ryo placed his hand, he received the limit break ability. Aoi Isogai received the magic barrier ability, and Karasawa got magic affinity. Meanwhile, our dear Takafuji received the detection ability. At least he had a blessing, but considering how simple it seemed, it didn't look like anything impressive. After that, the kingdom's people began measuring their talents and physical and magical capabilities. Ryu had superhuman physical abilities. Isogai had a natural talent for creating blessings and a high magical power measurement. Meanwhile, Tamaki also had great magical aptitude but was focused on destructive magic. As for our boy, he had no talent for magic manipulation at all. He realized that he came to another world only to be weaker than all the girls, and he wasn't happy about that. Already exhausted on the floor, he muttered that it didn't matter since they were clearly the real heroes here. That night, they gathered in Ryu's room to discuss their future. A boy looked around, wondering why Ryu's room was so much bigger than his. Meanwhile, the two girls wanted to know why he was even there if he wasn't a real hero. That one stung, but our boy decided not to answer. Tamaki then said that she wasn't really worried about him. But the protagonist noticed that she clearly was concerned about him getting too involved in this. She was obviously not an honest girl. Ryu then said that the detection ability he had could actually be very important. Takafuji noticed that each of them had very different opinions about him. Ryu then said that even if the boy was weak, Oa could just put a magic barrier around him. She agreed, saying that if he wanted that, then fine. Our guy just thought that for someone so quiet, she was actually really cute. That's when he stopped to think that all three of them were really attractive. Three lucky people in life. Tamaki then wanted to know if it was really okay for them to stay in this country. Ryu was about to say something when someone else commented that the country wasn't bad and the treatment was nice. They all looked at our boy, who was signaling for them to stay quiet. In his notebook, he had written that there were people listening to their conversation, so it was best not to say anything suspicious. The three of them stood there looking dumbfounded while he realized that the so-called blessing of detection was already proving useful. Even though he had no physical or magical talent, it was truly a remarkable ability. He could sense the presence of people or creatures beyond walls. For example, at this moment, he knew exactly who was spying outside. When he was in his own room, he tried to keep the maids away, but they always came back. He then wrote in his notebook and asked Aoi to cast a soundproof barrier. It wouldn't hurt to try, and she began her chant. The circle spread, but she warned that it wasn't very strong and wouldn't last long. Ryu praised her, calling her an amazing girl. She got a little flustered. Meanwhile, Takafuji just realized that these bastards were going to flirt right in front of him. Then Tamaki wanted to know why they were spying on their conversation in the first place. Ryu said it was obvious after all. They were heroes with enough power to destroy a nation, so it was too risky to leave them unchecked. But she angrily pointed out that it made no sense since they were forced to come to this place. That's when Takafuji mentioned that this country seemed desperate. He didn't understand this world's standards, but he suspected they were in a financial crisis. That was because the king was personally involved in numerous affairs, which was unusual. On top of that, he had very few vassals for a castle of this size. Tamaki said she noticed that too, but at least the food was good. It was simple but full of spices and delicious flavors. Takafuji, however, didn't seem to enjoy the food and wondered if there was something wrong with his taste. His friends commented that their rooms felt more like a soldier's quarters than a hero's. And our boy thought to himself that they hadn't even seen his tiny room yet. Since they had never been summoned elsewhere, they had nothing to compare it to. But he still remembered his arrival in Heigen very clearly. Then he told the three of them that they needed to consider an escape plan from this country, since his detection ability let him avoid all surveillance. In the meantime, they also had to figure out how to return to their original world and get out of here. Since the three of them were considered this place's only hope, there was no way they were going to let their hope return to their world. Besides, even though the princess had said there was no way to go back, it seemed like a lie or something she was hiding. Ryu said he agreed with the boy. The problem was that they were still weak and didn't know enough. So for now, they needed to observe things for a while. Suddenly, Tamaki moved closer to our boy. She commented on his yellow eye and asked what that was. Our boy quickly covered his face, realizing he had forgotten about that detail. After all, it wasn't common for a Japanese person to have a yellow eye. But Ryu just said that everyone has secrets they don't want to share, so it was best not to bother the guy about it. Every teenager goes through a phase like this, but soon enough, you grow out of it. For now, they should just ignore it. Our boy noticed that Ryu thought he was wearing a contact lens to look stylish like a protagonist, but maybe that was actually a great excuse. So he told them to behold the power of the mystical eye. Sometime later, he was back in his room, wondering what was up with this eye. He checked his status, and man, there were a lot of attributes listed. The problem was that, just like us, he didn't know this world's average, so he couldn't say for sure how strong or weak he was. But judging by the physical tests, maybe they were bad or something was off. Then he decided to check his abilities. He had a different ability in each eye, the Demon King's dark magic, the ability to steal abilities, and finally detection. He then noticed that he had some strange attributes, probably received when he was summoned as a monster. He belonged to the demonic race and was classified as a vampire with the rank of Baron. He had a debuff called Hatred of the Sun God. During the day, his attributes were reduced to 1/10, and he couldn't use his abilities. Now it all made sense. He had struggled during the tests because he was exposed to sunlight, and the food tasted bad because it had garlic. Not to mention, when he looked at the girls, he found himself strangely interested in biting their necks and drinking some fresh blood. This whole time, he had been so focused on using detection that he had forgotten to check what was happening inside his body. Multiple strange eyes, vampire traits, and all sorts of mutations. He couldn't even understand what he was anymore. Little by little, he started to remember everything that happened. After recalling everything and considering all the summonings, here's what he has. The detection ability allows him to sense any presence near him. He then grabs an old spoon and says that with another ability, he can consume the energy of a material and create a weapon. With that, the cast iron spoon transforms into a knife. The red eye man, motion detection, absolute measurement, long-range vision, microscopic vision, night vision, clairvoyance, illusions, X-ray vision, photographic memory, perception of external gazes. My God, what a list. He notices that at least everything was vision-related. It was some kind of eye 2.0. What he doesn't quite understand is the yellow eye. The description stated that magic circles seen by that eye could be transferred to his pupil and activated at will. He decides that later he'll have to take some time to study the magic of this world. The problem is that the list of abilities is long and there are several he doesn't understand. At least the vampirism part isn't too complicated. If he drinks enough of someone's blood to kill them, they turn into a ghoul. If it's a virgin, they become a subordinate vampire if he drinks their blood. If not, the person just turns into a ghoul. Additionally, he can simply kill someone, give them a bit of his blood, and they will become his servant too. Two interesting parts are that if he drains all the blood, he can steal the person's memories and also their abilities. As long as he can use his powers freely at night, he's sure it won't be hard to get stronger. But first, he needs to adapt to this body and this world. The next day, under the sunlight, someone introduces herself as the Knight Commander of the Kingdom of the Rising Sun. The peculiar blonde's name is Ijiana Ishida. Our boy, who's just a little bit sexist, says it's amazing that there's a female knight and commander in this place. Maybe that's possible in fantasy worlds, or maybe it's related to their financial issues. Then the woman calls out to the two girls, saying that they seem to have talent for magic, but they need to learn the basics of martial arts. Normally, they would start with strength training, but she thinks that won't be necessary. Our boy, however, isn't excited about this. Apparently, his stats aren't as impressive, considering that Ryu has 1500 strength and everything above 1000. Tamaki has more HP than him and 3500 intuition, while Aoi has slightly less intuition, but a bit more in everything else. The stats of the three, from the moment they appeared, already surpassed the limits of a human in this world. Then Ejiana tells them to choose what suits them best and later learn the basics of martial arts. However, the fool over there would be different. She warns that first they need to develop his physical strength. The problem is that the boy is doing push-ups under the sun, which is destroying his attributes. Not only is he weaker during the day, but he also gets severe headaches. Ijiana says she will personally train him, so he better take it seriously. But the poor guy is already getting dizzy, and there's no way for him to escape this. Suddenly, the princess, who is annoying as hell, asks for permission to enter with her group. That's exactly what Takafuji is thinking too. However, she wasn't alone. There were other people beside her. Since the woman next to the princess stood close to her, she was probably someone of high status as well. She was a beautiful woman, but her expression was cold like a doll with a fake smile. Ijiana greeted the princesses and asked what brought them there. Takafuji immediately stopped training and sat back completely relaxed, curious to see what would happen. The other girl just greeted them politely, while the annoying princess dramatically stated that she had put aside her commitments to come say hello, so everyone should be grateful. Our boy just laughed at her until the other woman stepped forward. She introduced herself as the second princess and said it was a pleasure to meet him. That afternoon, she wanted to have a conversation with him. The scene then shifted to a chamber in the castle. In front of a board, she explained that they would have lessons there, but he found it highly suspicious that he was getting a separate lesson. The other heroes were also having lessons, but with the first princess in a different room. The truth was, all of this was because the first princess refused to teach someone who wasn't a hero. To her, that was an insult and an absurdity. He didn't care much, but he swore that one day he would get revenge for this. The second princess then said she would begin the lesson, but our boy wanted to ask some questions first. He asked if the first princess was older than her since she was called the second princess, but she explained that no, things were complicated. To sum it up, she said that the first princess was the true heir to the throne. Takafuji knew that royal succession was always a messy affair. Obviously, he didn't want to get involved in something like that. During the lesson, he learned that the Kingdom of the Rising Sun was founded by the hero who defeated the previous demon king. That hero was a mage. In other words, the founder of this place was a witch, which was why witch worship was deeply rooted everywhere. The throne was always passed down through female heirs. They chose a king to marry, and only then did he become regent to govern the country. However, if the queen requested a divorce, he would stop being king. Thanks to the second princess, he learned about history and the fundamentals of magic, but he was already exhausted and went to sleep. Later that night, he started studying magic since the next day would be a practical test. At least he managed to borrow a book from the second princess. He knew she definitely didn't like that he had fallen asleep during class and didn't like that he asked for a book either. But just like a doll, she simply smiled and said it was fine. Looking at the pentagram, he said it was time to test what he couldn't manage the night before. He then activated the true mystic eye and observed the circle. In theory, he should be able to record it in his retina to use whenever he wanted. The problem was that nothing was happening. He wasn't even sure if it was activating at all. He also tried with other magic circles, but as he expected, nothing happened. So far, everything had been a complete failure. Then he remembered he had the 2.0 eye. saw some paper nearby, and started drawing the circles. The vision in that eye was so good that he could perfectly recall every circle he had seen before coming to this world. In theory, that should have been impossible due to the old man's hypnosis. But the eye was completely different, and he was able to draw the circles with ease. Staring at the paper, an energy radiated from his eye. It was something he had never felt before, so maybe he had finally activated this thing. Excited to test if it was working, he rang the little bell. A maid entered, asking if she had been summoned, and our boy explained that he needed a little favor. Before she could react, he activated his eye and successfully cast the old man's hypnosis spell. A second later, her eyes became unfocused. He ran his hand across her face and confirmed that the magic had worked. To test it further, he asked what color her underwear was, and she answered black. Not that he didn't already know, after all, he had X-ray vision, right? Considering everything that had happened, he wondered. Maybe the ability to steal magic could only store circles from the same world where he obtained it. If that was true, then the only magic he would really have was advanced hypnosis. That was one possibility, but he couldn't be sure. When he had been summoned to other worlds, he had also seen every circle. If he concentrated, maybe he could summon them too. With that, he recalled one of them and successfully created the magic in front of him. Instead of being sent to another world, he was teleported to a forest just ahead. Apparently, he could use this as a teleportation spell, and he could combine the red eye's long-range vision with the yellow eye's portal ability. With that, he could leave the castle anytime he wanted. Now that he was far away, there was no danger in testing other spells. He then touched a wall and created a dark magic circle. With this ability, he could control inanimate objects, move them freely, and store them in his shadow. Objects controlled by this magic couldn't interact with anything outside the spell's influence. However, he could release the control, allowing normal interaction. While it was a useful spell, it also had inconvenient limitations. With dark magic, he could also use Shadow Step. The ability allowed him to enter one surface and exit from another nearby. Inside a thin tree, he found it strange. He felt like he was in a spacious area. He then decided to test the creation ability again. A rock began to dissolve, and he transformed it into a sword. He focused and started recalling every movement his eye had captured from the commander. With just one look, he memorized them and effortlessly executed the same cuts. Now that it was nighttime, he planned to practice as much as possible since he'd be exhausted by morning. After some time, he was completely drained but had the feeling that something had improved. Then a window popped up, stating that he had obtained swordsmanship level 1. With that, he learned how to unlock abilities. Now it was time to figure out how to level up. Using his detection ability, he sensed something nearby. From the bushes, he saw some kind of monstrous rabbit carrying another creature in its mouth. It looked like a bird, but it had fur, which was strange. Using his identification skill, he found out it was a demon bird gecko. The problem was that, judging by its stats, the damn thing was actually quite strong. Then he remembered hearing some people in the castle talk about how this creature's feathers were used for various things, which made him wonder how such weak people were hunting these things. As he walked through the forest, he found other creatures that seemed weaker. However, the lowest attribute among them was 600, and some even surpassed his own. Clearly, this was a high-level monster forest, which was a problem. With his current stats, he could win in a one-on-one fight. The problem was that the chance of multiple enemies appearing was high. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the incredibly beautiful Igiana was walking through the halls and calling for her highness. She told the second princess that the area was secure, but even so, she shouldn't be wandering alone at night. However, the princess then said she wanted to have a conversation with her. She asked if it was true that artifacts weren't being used in Takafuji's training. The commander replied that none of the heroes were using artifacts yet. The girl pressed the issue, asking why and pointing out that sooner or later, they would have to use them. The woman glanced to the side and then said that artifacts increased strength, but these heroes were not ready yet. Without physical and mental strength, they could become too dependent on them. That's why, for now, the best approach was to monitor them and prepare them gradually. The girl lowered her gaze, then smiled, saying that she really should never have questioned the strongest human. The commander remained silent for a second before saying that her smile had lost its former shine. The second princess turned and said she hadn't even noticed that. Igiana then wanted to know her opinion on the first princess, to which she responded that she knew the girl was talented, dedicated, and an ambitious woman. However, the commander questioned whether she truly believed that. Then the second princess said that the place was safe from dangers, but not safe from people who listen in on conversations. She then wished her good night and left. The commander remained there thinking that Princess Aaliyah was being very cautious, but she shouldn't be afraid of her. A few days passed and our boy was getting used to this world. Obviously, the other heroes were making progress and he was the slowest when it came to physical evolution. On the first day, Ryu already looked comfortable wielding a sword, and now he was continuing down the path of a swordsman. Tamaki had started using a staff, but her magic had a peculiarity. She was slamming her spells into the ground as if wielding a giant hammer, and he couldn't understand the logic behind it. Meanwhile, Aoi was training with a bow. Normally, archers needed protection, but since she had a barrier, that actually made sense. So now they had Ryu, who was extremely strong in close combat, Tamaki, who blew everything up both from a distance and up close, and Aoi, who was a self-sufficient archer while also defending others. Our boy, on the other hand, had only been able to train properly for the past 3 days. He had already noticed that they were only teaching him how to throw weapons from a distance. They were training him in stealth movement and how to disable traps. It was obvious they wanted to turn him into a scout to make full use of his detection ability. But when night fell, he would return to the forest to practice his abilities. At the moment, he was practicing controlling objects freely and remotely. He directed the dagger's trajectory and canceled control at the last second so it would stick into the tree. However, as he looked up at the moon, he was still furious about that damn sun curse. He wondered if it would disappear once he leveled up. For now, all he could do was keep improving his abilities. The demon bird Tekka was there, drooling as it prepared to eat when something came rushing toward it. Man, it was Takafuji flying at full speed. The guy was practically off the ground. Now he was using his dark mana control combined with object control to restrain creatures. With that, he easily approached, locked eyes with the beast, and activated hypnosis. The monster froze, allowing him to get close without any risk. He finished it off, lifted it with dark magic, and stored it in the void. Man, he could enter his own void without a problem. And since he was a vampire, you already know what he was about to do. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was watching, he drank the monster's blood. Once he was done, he left the area. He quickly located his next target, but this one was ugly as hell, and he knew it wasn't going to taste good. Unfortunately, beggars can't be choosers, so he kept hunting until there was nothing left to do. As dawn broke, he teleported back to his room. So far, this had been his daily routine. Then Nala entered his room, greeted him, and told him to wake up. Our boy had been trying to use hypnosis on her as little as possible, but it was inevitable since he needed to gather information about this kingdom. Through this, he learned that the current queen had been unable to bear children for a long time. In a country ruled by women, that was a major problem, since the queen wouldn't have a daughter to inherit the throne. To make matters worse, young noble girls were mysteriously dying. To prevent their lineage from ending, they accepted a noblewoman as one of the king's concubines, and that woman gave birth to a child. That child was Aaliyah, the second princess. She was raised with love until she turned 7, but that's when the true queen finally gave birth to a daughter. Her name was Amanda, meaning the beloved girl. True to her name, the queen loved her far more than the other, especially since her daughter had inherited an incredible talent for magic. With that, Aaliyah was no longer considered a potential heir. The moment Amanda turned 7, she automatically assumed the position of the first princess. Everyone celebrated while Aaliyah stayed in the corner pretending not to care. But she realized that from that day forward, her existence no longer had any meaning in this world. She was forgotten by the people, abandoned by her own mother, and no one in the royal family wanted to interact with her. That was how Aaliyah was forced to live in solitude like a doll. Takafuji thought that she was just like him, since no one expected anything from either of them. She then smiled at him and gently asked him to wake up, telling him that even though the lessons were boring, they were essential for his survival. Our boy was exhausted, yawning, wondering why she was nagging him today, considering that she normally didn't bother him. She then commented that she had heard he was learning espionage techniques during training. Even though he wasn't talented in magic, it seemed like he had a good chance of making use of what he was learning here. One thing our protagonist didn't understand was why he couldn't properly use the magic taught in this world. He knew it was probably a rare case, since even Nala, a simple maid, could easily manipulate multiple objects. However, Aaliyah said that Commander Ijeana Ishida was a busy woman and wouldn't have taken time to train him if she didn't see potential in him. But the boy replied that maybe she just saw the advantage of being known as the person who trained one of the heroes. That's when Aaliyah slammed the table and said no. She was certain that he could become strong, and that was why she wanted to see him put in effort. He was a bit confused by how close she was, but she turned away and told him to follow. In the next scene, they were descending a long staircase. After what felt like an endless path, the two of them stood before a massive door. She cast a spell and said that they would continue his training in this room. Then she added that even though he was a hero, people called him a failure. She turned to him and asked if he didn't find that shameful. Takafuji once again wondered what was going on with this girl today to make her so fired up. He knew that ever since her misfortune, she had been suppressing her emotions. She had been faking it so well that people started calling her the doll princess. But at that moment, she was different. She was no longer the quiet and reserved girl he had met. She then entered the room, and on the ceiling was a massive magic circle. This would serve its purpose, she said, before warning him that at this rate, he would be exiled from the castle. Before he could explain himself, she recited a quote from the former queen. "They have no obligation to nurture incompetent people who come to this kingdom." Our boy still didn't care much and simply said that he wasn't incompetent. He had the detection ability, which was quite useful. She agreed, but at the same time, he wasn't putting in as much effort as the others. As someone carrying a blessing, he should take fate into his own hands and do his best. Takafuji, poor guy, was always falling asleep in class because he stayed up all night. But even though she didn't know it, he had been putting in effort, hunting in the dead of night. So he told her that he was trying. He was doing his best within his limits. It just didn't seem as powerful as those three. Nor was he as academically skilled as she was. But then Aaliyah revealed that this magic room had a barrier. He placed his hand on the door, and she told him that no one would hear his screams. The boy, however, just wanted to know how to open the damn thing. And that's when she suddenly stared at him, raised her foot, and kicked him in the back. What the hell? He slammed face first into the wall. He turned around, completely baffled. And she told him that he was in a much better position than she was, yet he refused to give his best. He needed to understand that if he were expelled from this castle, the creatures outside would kill him instantly. That's why he had to work hard to survive, even if it meant embarrassing himself. Our boy didn't care much about the kick. He seemed to enjoy getting beaten by women. That much was clear. In fact, he was impressed by her, realizing that the doll princess was no longer in that room. Then she shouted at him to take control of his own life. Suddenly, the guy started laughing, bursting into a full-blown fit. He even said that she really was a beautiful girl. He had truly underestimated her and never expected her to be such a strong person. That's when she asked if he was mocking her. But he answered that he wasn't, since he was actually one of the 4 people most concerned about his own safety among the heroes. She realized he wasn't joking and admitted that maybe she had been underestimating him instead. As soon as he activated his aura, she noted that strangely he seemed much stronger than just a moment ago. He simply thanked her for telling him the truth and said that since he was close to being exposed, he needed to come up with a plan. The truth was that for now, he still wanted to stay there and gather as much information as possible. The next day on the training grounds, he thought about showing the true strength of his blessing just to avoid being expelled. The problem was that they still wouldn't be entering any dungeons, and in the sunlight, he was completely weak. Once training wrapped up, our boy decided the best course of action was to talk to the commander. He called her over for a chat, hoping to convince the queen not to expel him. But the scene immediately cut to her saying that it would be quite difficult. He asked if she truly believed his ability was useless. It might seem like he wasn't putting in effort during training, but he was. But before he could continue, the commander interrupted him and said that actually she didn't think his ability was useless at all. In fact, she even wanted him to join her night brigade. That surprised him, and she explained that his ability was extremely valuable in the dungeons they raided. He could become an essential tool in any kind of adventure. However, he needed to understand that his words carried no weight and would never be enough to convince the queen. But if he chose to serve the kingdom as a soldier instead of as one of its weakest heroes, that would be reason enough for them not to exile him. Our protagonist paused to think. He knew that if he joined this country's knights, he would be trapped in this nation. It wasn't something he could decide so easily. So he told her that he appreciated the offer but needed some time to think about it. She responded that it was fine and told him that if he ever needed someone, he could talk to her. Our boy was direct and asked if she meant that he should go to her once he got exiled. She just looked out the window and said, maybe. A few days passed. Our boy was sleeping on his desk, wondering if it was true that the neighboring nation's people were coming for a visit. She explained that yes, they were, because it was a celebration party. Since numerous guests had been invited, there would be no classes or training that day. Our boy was exhausted, wondering why no one had warned him about this disaster. But she just said that students who sleep in class don't deserve to know things. He realized that even this damn woman didn't like him much. Sometime later, the Lemon Cavalry entered the city. Everyone was celebrating and setting off fireworks, while our boy thought that for a financially ruined country, they sure were spending a lot on this party. Maybe he should show up at the celebration since no one would notice. Or maybe it would be terrible to appear there and have to explain his existence to those people. They might even want to investigate him and find out why 4 heroes had been summoned. That would be a pain, so he dismissed the idea. But it wasn't like he couldn't find out what was happening there. So he activated his 2.0 eye, and his awareness began navigating through the hallways. He saw the 2 princesses and thought that his teacher looked stunning in her new dress. But as always, her smile still seemed a little fake. He saw all the fancy food on the tables and immediately realized that Nala had been lying. Earlier, while talking to her, he had discovered that one of the reasons this kingdom was going bankrupt was these ridiculously extravagant parties. It seemed the queen was obsessed with maintaining an image of splendor and luxury, completely draining the treasury. Then something surprising happened. He saw a group standing in front of Ryu and immediately knew. These were the heroes from another country who had also been summoned here. One of them had a particularly unique appearance. With blonde hair, it was hard to believe he was Japanese. He decided to use his identification skill and found out that the guy's name was Masayoshi Date. He thought that was a pretty classic name for a hero. But what he really wanted to know was why this guy was shouting at Ryu. He read his lips to find out what he was saying. And the blonde guy was shouting Takafuji's name, demanding that they bring him immediately because he was challenging him to a duel. Damn, this story was moving fast. The party was over in no time, and now Leah was announcing that Takafuji was coming. All the heroes in the room turned to look, and our boy realized that there was no escaping this. Masayoshi then stepped forward and formally challenged him to a duel. The room went silent, everyone curious to hear his response. Lazy as ever, our boy just asked why it had to be a duel of all things. Masayoshi yelled that it was to prove to the goddess that he was not worthy of her love. Takafuji was a bit confused, but the blonde told him to stop playing dumb. Masayoshi then declared that he knew very well that Takafuji had ended up in the white space where he met the goddess who brought them to this world. The protagonist just said, "So what?" since everyone had gone through that. But then Masayoshi revealed that he had proposed marriage to the goddess, to which she replied that if he could defeat Takafuji Linori, she would consider it. Our boy instantly realized that damn woman wasn't just trying to dump her problems onto him, she was also trying to get rid of him. He was definitely going to make her pay for this the next time he saw her. Strangely, the other heroes were looking at each other, confused about this white space and goddess talk. At that moment, Takafuji realized that they had been summoned differently since they had no idea what he was talking about. It would be too much trouble to explain everything, so for now, he decided to just play dumb. So he told the guy that he had no idea what he was talking about, but he accepted the duel. The blonde smirked, and our boy said that now they just needed to decide on the format. If it was a one-on-one combat duel, that would be way too easy. After all, unlike the other heroes, he didn't have a superhuman body or a combat-specialized class. Surely this guy hadn't gone through all this trouble just to bully someone who had all the disadvantages in the world. If that was the case, it would be downright pathetic. Masayoshi shouted that of course not, and he would accept any duel Takafuji proposed. The crowd was shocked that he had agreed to such stupidity. Then our boy mentioned a dungeon where he was supposed to train with the knights. They could compete to see who would be the first to kill the first floor's boss. Masayoshi agreed, saying it was a great idea and accepting the challenge. But Ryu warned our boy that while he might be able to navigate the dungeon with ease, he wouldn't be able to kill the boss. However, our boy just smiled and said he had a little plan. The duel was scheduled for the next day, and shortly after the duel, the queen asked if he was Takafuji Linori. She demanded he explain why he had accepted a duel and been completely pulverized. Our boy thought pulverized was the perfect word. Masayoshi was a force of nature. No creature in that place stood a chance, and even the boss fell in seconds. On the other hand, our boy had used detection to sneak past everything. The objective conclusion was that he had been utterly crushed in this duel. The queen then said she had been ignoring just how lazy and weak he was. She had believed in him because the Knight Commander saw potential in him. But with this act, he had brought weakness to the kingdom. And that was something she could not forgive. Olia already knew what was coming, and sure enough, the queen declared that Takafuji Linori was banished from the kingdom. The first princess seemed pleased, while the other two girls looked a bit sad. But the one smiling the most completely happy was our boy. That bastard definitely wanted this to happen. The queen asked if he had any objections, and he said yes. He wanted to know exactly how he had harmed the kingdom. She said it was obvious. By losing the duel, he had stained the kingdom's reputation. He then explained that if it was just a race, then yes, he had lost. But the duel's actual wager was about worthiness. It was just a battle to determine who deserved to be loved by a certain girl. Additionally, they had promised not to let anyone outside the duel know the results. Not to mention, he wasn't even considered a hero in this kingdom, and his presence wasn't revealed to other nations. With no power, no influence, and no one knowing who he was, there was no way he had brought dishonor to this place. After all, the duel was nothing more than a silly game. However, he had taken advantage of entering that dungeon to use his detection ability. A few guys tossed a bag of money, and he said he had gotten this small reward. The queen and princess were impressed, and he said he was offering this little treasure to her majesty. She seemed pleased, while our boy simply stated that it had been easy to find with his ability. The truth was that Takafuji just didn't want to leave the castle yet, so he used these coins to buy himself more time there. That way, he got rid of the queen's and Masayoshi's nonsense for a while. And now, he was back to his usual nights of hunting, leveling up peacefully. As long as no one knew he was still getting stronger, he was fine. The only annoying part was that he was starting to get sick of drinking that bird's blood. He glanced to the side and realized he was in the same spot where he had started hunting that night. The forest was really messing with his sense of direction, and he wondered if there was another way to use detection. He activated his demon vision along with detection and noticed a barrier leading to another area. It was some kind of illusion that made people unknowingly change direction. But with his eye, he could see through it and wondered if there were stronger creatures hidden inside. He'd always teleport back if anything dangerous appeared, so he stepped in. And hiding inside was a giant wolf with its pack. As soon as he took his first steps, he noticed movement nearby. It was a few wolves approaching. It was the first time he had dealt with creatures larger than his camera view, so he activated his trap web immediately. A bunch of traps formed around him, and within seconds, the wolves were all dead on the ground. If he had to face more than 3 of them at once, it would have been really difficult. Luckily, traps were simple to set up, and the beasts ended up getting caught in them. He started sending the bodies into the void, muttering that at least they seemed to give more experience than the birds. A while later, he was back in the forest. In the middle of a lake, there was a tree under the moonlight, and our boy thought it looked like the perfect setting for a boss fight. The moment he turned around and said, "But this isn't a video game," the boss was already behind him. Man, before he could even react, his arm was gone. What the hell? He was still looking to the side when the beast swiped at him, sending him rolling back first into a tree. He didn't even understand what had happened, and the creature was already face to face with him. It was a mystical beast called Fenrir. He quickly realized that this thing wasn't a demon but something entirely different. Maybe it was some kind of mini-boss, or something, since he didn't die instantly. He could still escape through the shadows, but that would be a problem given how fast the creature was. But he didn't have much time. Fenrir was already lunging at him with a bite to finish him off. The monster destroyed the tree, but our boy was no longer there. He had already teleported to the top of another tree and flew away with a wing. Remembering the world where he had gained his vampire powers, he thought, "I never expected I'd need to use this so soon." Fenrir looked up and questioned why he had come there. The fact that it could speak meant it was definitely a special kind of beast. Our boy replied that he had just gotten lost in the forest. But the wolf called him a liar, saying that he had clearly crossed the illusion portal and entered this place intentionally. Takafuji admitted that he was curious. Normally, an illusion was used to protect something important, and he wanted to know what it was. Fenrir, however, said that enough talk. He had trespassed and killed some of his kind, so he wouldn't be leaving alive. But Takafuji just smirked and said that the more the wolf talked, the more convinced he was that something valuable was hidden here. Now he really wanted to know what was so important. The wolf declared that, as a final gift before his next life, he would let him know. This land was where they had made a pact with a witch. He didn't know why, but ever since that pact, they had been protecting this place. His only duty was to eliminate any threats or monsters that invaded. And naturally, an intruder like Takafuji was also a target. With that said, he warned that if the boy stayed still, he would at least die painlessly. But Takafuji was more focused on the fact that his arm was back. Apparently, his vampire regeneration was even more impressive than he had imagined. Fenrir prepared to attack, saying that it was clear Takafuji was no ordinary human. He lunged forward, stating that there was no way he could let him leave alive. Takafuji tried to dodge, and the area around them exploded. Thanks to his demon eye, he barely managed to read the wolf's movements in time. He tried to fly away, realizing that there was no way he could win this fight right now. His plan was to gain some distance by flying, then drop to the ground and teleport out. But mid-fall, the creature launched a barrage of ice attacks. Takafuji raised his arms to protect himself, but the attack struck a tree instead, slicing it clean in half. The wolf turned its head toward him for just a second, then in an instant it was already lunging for another bite. Another explosion of force and he barely escaped to the side. The monster was so fast that he had zero chance of using hypnosis, and it was becoming impossible to find an escape route. He saw a waterfall ahead and wondered how the hell he was going to get out of this. The wolf was coming from above, sending another ice attack while preparing to bite. Our boy braced himself, but this time his wings were completely shredded. Fenrir grinned, then came in for the final attack. But Takafuji grinned back, activated his ability on the ground, and sent up a barrage of spikes. Fenrir barely managed to dodge to the side, avoiding being impaled. Takafuji had been storing leftover tree trunks in the other dimension in case something like this happened. The problem was that the situation hadn't exactly gotten easier because of it. As Fenrir locked eyes with him, Takafuji tried to find an opening to use teleportation. He wanted to use hypnosis to distract the beast for just a second. So he began casting dark magic again, muttering that he'd have to buy some time. He pulled out a few daggers and the wolf prepared to counter. Takafuji knew he had to create at least one opening. He expanded his aura while the wolf wondered what the boy was up to. The protagonist knew that the creature was overwhelmingly strong. He had nearly gotten his back torn apart by a bite. At the last second, he pulled out more knives and hurled them toward Fenrir's head. The wolf thought it was a pointless move. Such a poorly planned attack wouldn't work on him. He swung his tail, sending out another ice barrage, but our boy blocked with his knives. At least thanks to his regeneration, as long as he protected his head and legs, he could keep moving and stay alive. Meanwhile, Fenrir was starting to be impressed by how persistent this kid was. Our boy then activated a black thread trap. The surrounding trees had already been marked, and the wolf was caught in the bindings. For the first time, Fenrir seemed to be immobilized. Takafuji smirked for a second, but within moments, all the trees shattered. The wolf simply stated that something like that wouldn't even leave a scratch. Stunned and terrified, Takafuji went back to trying to escape, realizing that he had only one option left. As he dodged more ice attacks and the wolf lunged in for another bite, he prayed that this would work. He kicked off a tree, launching himself skyward with a Parker move. The wolf assumed he was trying to flee by flying. What an idiot. He sent out another tail attack, declaring that the boy had just made himself an easy target. But as he had been moving, Takafuji had been laying out threads using his other eye. And now the entire area he had traveled through had turned into a teleportation circle. He activated it, saying, "Now there's no way you can escape." The wolf realized the boy had vanished from above and wondered where he had gone. But Takafuji was already on Fenrir's back, whispering, "The plan worked. Time to say goodbye, buddy." With that, he stabbed the wolf straight in the eye. The beast howled in agony as Takafuji casually remarked that getting beaten up was kind of his style. But the mystical creature started thrashing its tail, obliterating everything around it. One of the attacks nearly hit our boy, but now that the beast was blind, dodging was much easier. At first, he thought he had only taken out one eye. But no, the kid had been quick. He had slashed both. The monster was completely blind. But the way it had stopped moving made Takafuji realize something. It was trying to locate him by scent. And the bloodthirsty aura radiating from the creature was terrifying. Once again, it lunged for a bite, but our boy simply said, "Yeah, I think it's time to go." Its attacks had slowed and teleporting away was now easy. The wolf was left behind, wondering where the hell that bastard had gone. After a few teleport jumps, Takafuji collapsed into his bed, completely exhausted. After all that suffering, all he had managed to do was slightly injure the creature. But next time he would win. From that day forward, he began infiltrating the castle's equipment storage, gathering high-quality materials and metals, just in case another emergency like that ever happened again. During the fight, Takafuji had managed to steal some of Fenrir's fur. The material had crystallization and hardening properties. As soon as he applied a bit of dark magic, it immediately solidified. That explained why every time the monster attacked, there was an energy surge in its strikes. If this was a material that reacted to being touched by humans, he wondered what would happen if he crafted a weapon with it. He ended up creating a type of thread called Gleikner. These were indestructible strands no matter how much force was applied to them, and when infused with magic, they hardened and crystallized. For him, this was perfect. Not even Fenrir himself would be able to break it. He then had an idea and modified the thread to form a glove. A black glove that had the same dark hardening and crystallization as the threads. Since Fenrir had attacked him so many times, he had gathered a good amount of material, giving him another interesting idea. The next day, our boy was suited up in a full custom outfit, complete with boots and a suit. Now, it was revenge time. A yellow explosion lit up the forest, startling Fenrir. Takafuji appeared with a casual, "Hey, it's been a day since we last saw each other." Fenrir was furious. This damn bastard had actually dared to set foot in his land again. The monster was still blind, and Takafuji commented on how beautiful his eyes were. The creature immediately lashed out, telling him to shut up. Our boy was impressed. Even blind, Fenrir was still that accurate. The wolf then warned that no one had ever stepped into this land twice and left alive. Takafuji noted that between its rage and the pain of losing its eyes, the creature was a real stubborn bastard. Its fur was incredible, so obviously he needed to kill it and take more. Fenrir kept attacking until Takafuji touched a tree. From inside it, several black wolves emerged. The beast had no idea what was happening as it was bitten from all sides. Takafuji casually remarked that by scent alone, Fenrir should already know what they were. He was being bitten by the corpses of his own kind. The monster roared in fury, demanding to know how Takafuji dared to do something like this. But our boy simply replied that they seemed useful, so he made them his subordinates. Fenrir thrashed, shaking everything off, sending a few wolves flying, and one of the attacks almost hit Takafuji. The protagonist's attack hadn't been effective, but it had bought him some time. Even so, the wolf managed to swipe at him with a powerful paw strike. He barely teleported away mid-attack as the wolves surrounded the trees. As soon as he stopped behind a tree to catch his breath, Fenrir was already lunging for another strike, but another teleport saved him. The monster was getting pissed at this constant evasion while Takafuji was now appearing above him. The boss prepared to pounce, ready for the kill. And that's when Takafuji grinned and said, "At no point was I ever trying to escape." The creature leaped forward, only to slam into invisible threads, instantly getting caught. Fenrir couldn't believe it, even with his sense of smell. He hadn't detected anything. As Takafuji hovered above, the wolf demanded to know what the hell that bastard had done. And our boy explained, "These threads were made from your own fur. That's why you couldn't detect them. It smelled the same as you." Since the moment he had arrived, every attack he had received, every wolf he had sent out, it had all been a distraction. While the monster was busy, he had been weaving the trap the entire time. Now that Fenrir was immobilized, there was nothing he could do. Takafuji bid him farewell and activated the thread's compression. The lines tightened, pulling the beast to the ground. The watching wolves stared in silence. Fenrir, in disbelief, wondered if this was really the end. If he died, the pact would also be broken. But my guy, too late for that. Takafuji didn't just kill him, he had already drunk his blood. That single death alone earned him 5 levels and some extra abilities. That's when he noticed something interesting in the system, a unique skill, Bastard King. Then someone called him Master. When he turned, it was the wolves he had killed. They were now standing before him, apparently able to communicate, most likely due to his new ability. He wondered if this skill applied to any subordinates. One of the wolves then asked him, "Why don't you make Fenrir a subordinate too?" Their former master had been a creature that had fought desperately to protect this land and had always shielded them. That's why those who once served Fenrir now wanted to follow him as an ally. Takafuji took a deep breath. It wasn't like there was any downside for him in doing that. The problem was, he was already exhausted and running out of energy. Meanwhile, back at the castle dinner, Ryu was pointing out that the first and second princesses didn't seem to get along very well. Tamaki disagreed, saying it wasn't that, they just had different personalities. Aoi wasn't sure and started discussing the topic further. Takafuji, however, didn't give a damn. He was too pissed off that his food always had garlic in it. That's when Ryu suddenly suggested that he should help with the situation. Our boy immediately asked why they were talking about him. Aoi or Tamaki could handle it. They were women, so they could just talk to the princesses. But Ryu insisted. Takafuji had classes with the second princess and was closer to her, so maybe it would be easier to find a way to bring the two sisters closer. Takafuji simply replied that the first princess was stubborn as hell, and trying to make peace between them would never work. But then Ryu told him not to worry. Just ask, and she would listen. Our boy had no idea why, and Ryu explained that it was because she was completely in love with him. Judging by the girl's reactions, our boy realized that Ryu's reputation was going straight down the drain. Ryu then added that if he accepted, he could ask for a free day once a week. And since our boy hated daytime training, he agreed instantly. The problem was that first, he had to talk to the first princess. So he knocked on her door. She was already standing there with her arms crossed, saying that she was only talking to him because Ryu had asked her to, so he better speak quickly. The moment he stepped inside, he already wanted to go back to his room. Before he could even open his mouth, she declared that for today only, she would allow him to address her directly. He should feel very grateful for such a rare opportunity. He ignored everything she was saying and instead noticed how luxurious her room was. Seeing his reaction, she smugly assumed he was fascinated by the wealth she possessed, riches he would never obtain in his lifetime. He then pointed at a duck figurine and asked if she really liked that. Amanda scoffed, calling him an idiot. She was royalty. Everything she owned was either a gift from her mother or from noble families. Our boy just wanted to disappear from there and decided to get this over with as quickly as possible. So he finally brought up the subject of her relationship with the second princess. Amanda immediately cut him off, saying that she had never cared about her. Takafuji realized he shouldn't have accepted this stupid deal. Tired of the theatrics, he flatly stated that Ryu had asked him to help the two princesses talk more. But Amanda replied that she personally had no interest in that. He didn't quite understand why, and she said that as a commoner, he shouldn't even be getting involved. He rubbed his face in frustration. He was going to have to take the easy route. He again mentioned that this was a request from Ryu, and that he would be very sad if this opportunity didn't work out. Suddenly, she was enthusiastic, asking him to explain the details of the plan. At the very least, she was childish enough for that tactic to work. Sometime later, Amanda explained that their relationship hadn't always been this way. When they were younger, they got along very well. They talked and spent all their time together. Aaliyah was always intelligent and loved playing with her and having fun. That's why Amanda had always liked following her around. But one day, out of nowhere, Aaliyah started distancing herself. Shortly after that, Amanda turned 7 and received the title of First Princess, inheriting the right to the throne. That was when she discovered that Aaliyah wasn't really her sister, nor was she the daughter of the same mother. From that day forward, everything changed, leading to the strained relationship they had now. The truth was that to become queen, she had undergo extremely strict training. It was only through that experience that she realized just how exceptional and kind Aaliyah was. She found herself wishing that Aaliyah was still by her side. But the adults never allowed that to happen, and the distance between them only grew. She turned away and said that was all she had to say. Takafuji at least understood now. All of her arrogance came from how the adults had raised her. Just like her room, it had nothing that truly reflected her. Everything she owned and even her personality to some extent had been shaped by others. Acting superior was just the only way she could express even a little individuality. Amanda then laid down on her desk and said that now that she has shared everything, you should give her some advice. Takafuji told her that she should go to Aaliyah and say, "From now on, I'm calling you my sister." But Amanda replied that if she said something like that, all the maids would start gossiping. He laughed and asked if the maids were somehow above the princess. It was strange that the future queen wasn't even allowed to decide how to act. She tried to explain that it would only cause problems for Aaliyah, but he told her that Aaliyah wasn't as weak as she thought. She hesitated for a moment, then finally said that she would consider what he had said and thanked him. Without saying anything, he just left the room. Sometime later, he told everything to Nala. The maid listened but didn't seem too excited about it. Still, she said she would deliver the message. Our boy knew that this was the best way to get the message across since Nala was also close to the second princess. The next morning, Nala came to him saying she had something to tell him about the second princess. He asked what it was and she said that Aaliyah had sent word that today they would have a special training session. Poor Takafuji already knew that meant trouble was coming. In the middle of a busy street, there he was, following the two princesses around. He wondered why they had to come all the way here just for a lesson. Aaliyah explained that getting accustomed to the streets and atmosphere of the city was an important part of social studies. That was why he would be accompanying her to his shop. He asked what they were going to buy and she suggested that they should take a look at some accessories. Already inside the store, he wondered why a princess was personally shopping for something like this. She was completely engrossed and then asked him which one he thought looked better. Not caring much, he just said both looked nice. That's when Aaliyah told him to focus, the gift wasn't even for her. He was confused, so Nala explained that it was a present for the first princess's birthday. After delivering his message, Aaliyah had replied that tomorrow they would go out together to buy a present for her newfound sister. He said he understood, but wanted to know why they cared about his opinion. Aaliyah said that since he had entered her room and talked for a long time, maybe he knew more about Amanda's tastes than she did. However, she explained that her room only had gifts and nothing she had chosen herself, so anything would do. The second princess asked if that meant gifts were useless, but he explained that a gift's value came from who gave it. That was why he believed that whatever she chose would already be enough. Nala thought the boy was being kind, but he was just giving the fastest answers to get home and sleep as soon as possible. Still, the second princess was happy and immediately went to buy the gift. The maid praised our boy, saying that thanks to him, they had this idea. And seeing Aaliyah smile, she added that it was really nice to see her happy again. Aaliyah turned around, asking what they were talking about, and Nala quickly covered it up. 5 days passed. At the very least, he had been invited to the first princess's birthday party. The place was filled with ridiculously expensive food and high-status guests. Everyone stood around looking like fools, badly drawn as he put it, while our boy observed everything with his demon eye. As usual, he was listening in on conversations with Aaliyah and wondering where the second princess was. Then he spotted her, hiding behind a pillar. She seemed nervous about approaching her younger sister. Considering Amanda was talking with Ryu, it was understandable that getting involved in that conversation would be difficult. He decided to play dumb and give her a hand. So he suddenly appeared beside Aaliyah, making her jump and ask what he was doing there. Takafuji replied that last time she had kicked him, so she shouldn't feel bad about it. He asked where all that courage from before had gone, then shoved her forward. She stumbled straight into Amanda. The nobles all looked on in confusion while our boy just hoped this wouldn't turn into a disaster. She had already gone this far, now she just had to hand over the gift. Aaliyah took a deep breath and presented the present to Amanda. Amanda hesitated for a second, then opened the box and took a look inside. She then said she wanted to wear it immediately, and Aaliyah helped her put it in her hair. She turned to ask how she looked, and Aaliyah said it suited her very well. Amanda smiled, and the party continued as usual. Then Amanda said she wanted another present. She wanted Aaliyah to start calling her big sister. Aaliyah was caught off guard and suddenly found herself remembering their time together as children. She then said that she would be happy to. Amanda was surprised, and they hugged in an emotional moment. Meanwhile, Takafuji just stood there, thinking that at least this problem had been solved. Strangely, the king and queen also seemed happy about it, which made him think these girls had been dragging this out for no reason. Ryu told our boy that it had really been a great idea to have him handle this, to which our boy replied that he had worked hard to make it happen, so he better get a good reward. Ryu said okay, he would try to find something worthwhile. But looking at the two princesses, he was genuinely happy that it had worked out. Takafuji, on the other hand, just thought that this guy really always acted like a perfect hero. He then said goodbye, stating that he was going to get some fresh air. When he stepped outside, Aaliyah approached him and thanked him. Our boy just told her not to worry, there was no one around to listen to the conversation. Aaliyah smiled, saying that his detection ability really made things easier. Takafuji then asked if she felt better now that she had started expressing her emotions. She got angry, saying that if anyone never showed emotions, it was him. But suddenly, there was a bloodbath on the ballroom floor. Everyone was in shock, and our boy realized that after this, Aaliyah would never be called the doll princess again. A scream echoed through the hall, and both of them turned toward it. Aaliyah was about to run, but he blocked her path and told her to stay put. There was a head flying through the air, and the king and queen were dead. What the hell happened here? A man shouted, ordering the corrupt to stay silent. He declared that the former rulers had been recklessly spending the kingdom's finances without concern for the people. The king, who had done nothing to stop the queen, also deserved to die. That was why he, a man named Videre, who possessed royal blood, would now assume the throne. And the person called Aegiana would be the new queen. Man, it was the commander who had been training our boy this whole time. Now things were getting complicated. The two of them stood there, shocked, while poor Amanda approached her mother's severed head. She started activating her power, calling them insane. She was already preparing a sphere of light. But girl, this is not a good idea. Obviously, Aegiana moved in an instant and sliced her up. She didn't kill her, but damn. I actually felt bad for the girl, but at least she looked cool as soon as that useless piece of trash hit the floor. She writhed in pain, and the brute she had just received rolled across the ground. The heroes were in shock, and Aegiana told Ryu not to move. If he attacked in any way, his death wouldn't be peaceful. That's when Videre shouted, saying that they were merely children and pawns of the witches. They had betrayed the witches' will by making the foolish decision to summon heroes. That was a grave sin, one that could only be forgiven through death. Man, while poor Amanda was crying out for her sister, Aegiana slashed her down. What the hell, girl? This commander was a real plot twist. Everything flipped. The one I hated, I now liked. The one I liked, I now hated. Aaliyah was about to do something, but the protagonist knew it was stupid. She was about to scream for her sister, but he immediately covered her mouth, telling her that getting caught would be the dumbest move possible. A rebellion was the last thing he had expected. Then Videre ordered the citizens and soldiers to send these fools who stood against the witches to meet them. A noble tried to say something, but man got slashed in the back before he could finish. The bastard even smiled at the sky, declaring that now he had finally purified the entire royal family. Anyone who opposed the witches will deserve death. Takafuji kept whispering for Aaliyah to calm down, otherwise, she was going to die too. Either she did something reckless and died stupidly right there, or the two of them escaped now. The moment Amanda died, Ryu ran to her body. He shouted that this was insane. No one deserved to die for something so meaningless. But Videre simply said that the heroes were still too young. Every noble who had been there did not deserve the life they had. They didn't understand the true state of their country. Ryu screamed that even so, they didn't have to kill them. But Videre only said that if he had seen the horrors of the city, he would understand. Then he ordered Aegiana to capture the heroes. She activated her aura, still beautiful as ever, but more dangerous than ever, and told Ryu that it would be better if he didn't resist. But man, Ryu's not right in the head. He activated his limit break blessing and sent the light slash toward her. But Aegiana barely moved. She casually extended her sword and blocked it with ease. She even complimented him, saying that both his power and judgment weren't bad. Once again, Ryu lunged forward, unleashing a storm of slashes. But the way Aegiana calmly handled everything, it was clear the boy had zero chance. His attacks were ripping apart the hall while Aoi held up a barrier, blocking an onslaught of swords. Tamaki said that they needed to get Ryu out of there and escape immediately. The problem was that they were completely surrounded by soldiers. This wouldn't be easy to resolve. Aegiana remained calm while Ryu was already exhausted. She commented that since even Tamaki wasn't making a move, this victory would be easy. Ryu barely blocked another strike before she leaned in close and asked, "What are you going to do?" Even if he kept fighting, he couldn't win. It would be better if he surrendered so they could be captured. Then she would end the second princess right now. Aaliyah lay there, collapsed, while our boy warned her straight up. "Need to go now. If you stay here, you're going to die. You heard that, right?" She hesitated, but he pushed further, asking if she was really going to give up again after all this. Aaliyah realized what he meant. He was talking about her sister, about how she'd abandoned her that time. And that was when she decided she wasn't going to give up. She would survive, so that one day she could get revenge. She wasn't going to let Aegiana decide how she would die. He smiled and said that if that was the case, he would help her escape. But from now on, he wasn't going to call her the second princess. He would just call her Aaliyah. At that exact moment, Ryu's sword was shattered. He realized he didn't stand a chance, and Aegiana said, "This is the end." Man, she kicked him right in the gut with the sharp edge of her heel. That one hurt. The poor guy spat out his lunch from 3 days ago, and Tamaki immediately saw that this wasn't going to work. He was completely down on the ground, and she realized that the longer they stayed there, the more dangerous things got. She decided she had to save Ryu immediately, but in just 1 second, Ajiana obliterated Elway's barrier with a single strike. Both girls were stunned, but the commander just gave the order to capture everyone. Man, the soldiers came in and slammed the two of them onto the ground. They should at least be thankful they didn't get their heads cut off. Then she ordered them all to be taken to prison. And just to rub salt in the wound, Ajiana gave Ryu one last look and questioned whether she had wasted too much time trying to train him. As Aaliyah watched the scene unfold, she thought that at the very least, the girl wouldn't be able to escape alone. But girl, she wasn't alone. She had our protagonist. Using his detection ability, he pinpointed the best corridor for them to take, allowing them to slip past without the guards noticing. As they ran, Aaliyah was amazed at how far he could detect people's presence. He then asked if she knew how to use magic. She answered that she only knew the basics. So he pointed to the end of the hallway and said that in 10 seconds, 3 soldiers would appear. She had to take care of them. She hesitated, asking if they couldn't just avoid them, but he explained that wasn't an option. She took a deep breath, nodded at him, and he continued counting down. 2 seconds. A sword appeared. 1 second, and she fired a burst of air. 3 spheres formed around the soldiers' heads, cutting off their oxygen, and they collapsed unconscious. Takafuji was impressed. No wonder she was his teacher. Aaliyah explained that it was much easier to use magic when you had time to prepare like that. But then she noticed that he looked tired and asked if he was okay. Our boy simply replied that unfortunately, their enemies didn't care whether he was okay or not. Then he kept running, saying they had to take advantage of the weakened security. He managed to take out the soldiers, but he was sure he had 0 chance against Ajiana. The main goal of this escape was not to be seen by her. That woman was on a completely different level. They found an empty room, and he confirmed that at least no one was there. He searched for an escape route and then asked if she was okay with all this. He asked because, man, there had been a massacre of all the maids in the palace. He was horrified that they had gone as far as to kill every single servant. Aaliyah walked to the corner and called out for Nala. Man, poor girl, she didn't deserve to die. She hugged her tightly, and our boy immediately remembered what she had said before, that just seeing the princess smile was enough to make her happy. He fell silent for a second. Then after a moment, Aaliyah gently laid Nala to rest and thanked him for waiting. He said it was perfect because he needed time to recover, but the real question now was, how are they going to escape? The 3 heroes were already behind bars, and Ajian explained that she had placed a seal on the prison that was impossible to break from the inside. So they better stay put. Tamaki told her to take off the handcuffs then, if it was so secure. She had a point. But then Ryu explained that there was no way the Heroes Alliance would stay quiet if they were locked up like this. They were definitely going to be used as hostages, and the handcuffs were there so they couldn't take their own lives. Ajiana actually praised him, saying that for someone so hot-headed, he was surprisingly level-headed. But Ryu had his aura activated, and man, he was pissed. Even the girls were startled by the killing intent radiating from him. The commander recognized that look. Thinking back to her days on the battlefield, she had seen that expression before. The face of someone furious at their own weakness. Just like she had been in the past. She kept staring at Ryu, filled with anger. Then she turned away and said that he was too young. He wouldn't survive for long if he didn't let go of those emotions. If he had stayed calm earlier, he could have at least saved Tamaki or Aoi. Now all 3 of them were locked up. With that, she left, while they just sat there looking like fools. Ryu clenched his fists in frustration, seething at the fact that the damn woman still acted like some wise mentor even in a situation like this. Walking up the stairs, Igiana was in disbelief that they still hadn't been found. Takafuji was escaping even better than she had expected. She then ordered the soldiers to move faster and gave a like on this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers. Activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.